My name is Ryan Carter, and until last week, I believed with every fiber of my being that work and love could coexist in perfect harmony, as long as I never asked for anything more than what I'd earned. For years ago, when Wolf and Morrow Strategies was little more than an idea scribbled on a napkin, I stood beside Juliana as she pitched potential clients over lukewarm coffee. We were young, hungry, and convinced that the healthcare world needed more than catchy slogans and slick brochures. It needed authenticity, stories that resonated, data that mattered, a human touch. I threw myself into building those campaigns, breathing life into slides, proofreading proposals at midnight, and answering every after-hours call with a calm voice that said, "We're on it." When Juliana incorporated my salary into her startup budget, I befriended spreadsheets and pored over market analyses like they were best-selling novels. I subscribed to industry journals. I bookmarked competitor launches. I volunteered for last-minute presentations. And every morning, I reminded myself that no one owed me a free pass, especially not because I was married to the boss. For a long time, that mindset worked. I chased targets with the zeal of a hunter on the prowl, closing the regional oncology account on my first day as a junior strategist. I earned glowing internal reviews. I never missed a deadline or backed away from a challenge. When crises erupted, server crashes at midnight, a typo in live digital ads that threatened our credibility, I stayed at my desk until the issue was resolved and then promised myself one quick hour of sleep before diving back in. I never asked for a raise. I never took a sick day. I never filed for overtime. I believed that if I showed up, delivered results, and carried my weight, my loyalty would speak louder than any paycheck. I believed that by keeping my relationship with Juliana separate from my work, I carved out a reputation of merit. I believed loyalty rewarded itself. And for 4 years, all the pieces fit together. My colleagues respected my work ethic. Clients trusted my insights. Our office culture, once scrappy and small, expanded into sleek glass-walled boardrooms and a talented team that embraced our motto, marketing with meaning. We won awards. We held charity fundraisers. We donated pro bono hours to community clinics. We celebrated new hires and toasted at happy hours until the sky turned pink. Through it all, I balanced my role as strategist, partner, and husband, careful never to blur those boundaries. I greeted Juliana at home with the same deference I showed at work, deferring to her deadlines, letting her vent about finances or late deliverables, offering to proofread her speeches for industry panels. She reciprocated by listening to my ideas for creative collateral, by texting me business articles at odd hours, by plotting a future where Wolf and Morrow dominated statewide healthcare marketing. We were a team. The firm grew. The marriage thrived, or so I thought. Then came the day I discovered a lump in my mother's brain. I was on the train heading back from a client meeting when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, Grey Ridge Medical. The voice on the other end crackled with authority. "Is this Mr. Carter?" "Dr. Carter's office. We have your mother's MRI results." For a moment, I thought they meant I'd read the email wrong. My mother, Miriam Carter, was chief of neurosurgery at that very hospital, an iron-willed surgeon who had saved hundreds of lives. She never let anyone call her patient. But the radiologist had flagged a suspicious mass, and now she needed surgery. I barely registered the details. My stomach tightened, my throat closed, and I felt, for the first time, utterly powerless. I called my mother between meetings, my voice catching on her greeting. "Mom, what's going on?" She sounded calm, too calm, almost clinical. "Ryan, listen," she said. "This is serious. I'm scheduling surgery next week to remove the lesion. It's not guaranteed to be benign. I want you there." I blinked back tears at the thought of my invincible mother lying on a gurney, under the bright lights of an operating suite. "I'll be there," I promised. But then I remembered my calendar. I remembered the pitch for regional oncology, the same presentation Juliana had personally assigned to me. I remembered the pitch deck that needed final design refinements, the rehearsal with the sales team, the approval from the director. "Mom, I'm booked that day," I said, my voice faltering. "I have to be in the boardroom." The rest of the afternoon blurred. I sent 11 emails, rescheduled conference calls, tried to coordinate with junior associates to cover my workload. I texted Juliana, "Mom needs surgery next Wednesday. Can I take that day off?" No response. I checked my vacation balance, 20 days. Unused. Perfect attendance. I left the office early to clear my head, wandering the city streets as dusk fell. Streetlights blinked on. I felt the weight of every choice I'd ever made, The late nights, the missed family dinners, the promotions I accepted without question. Suddenly, my whole career felt like a house of cards built too close to the wind. That evening, I paced our living room, rehearsing the conversation. I imagined Juliana's calm tone, her well-phrased rebuttal that would place business above everything else. I convinced myself it would be different. I reminded myself that this was about my mother. This was about life and death. I had earned this. I had sacrificed for this firm. I had proven my loyalty 1,000 times over. I deserved one day off, one day to stand by the woman who raised me to believe in loyalty, compassion, and unwavering dedication. The next morning, before sunrise, I dressed in a crisp white shirt and tie, like any other day. As I drove to the office, my heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and dread. I arrived early, took a deep breath in the empty lobby, and walked to Juliana's office. The door was ajar. She was on a video call, her profile sharp in the glow of her monitor, reviewing financial projections. I cleared my throat. She did not look up. "Juliana," I began, my voice catching. "I have a request." She tapped her pen, her eyes still on the screen, and then closed her laptop with deliberate slowness. When she finally faced me, her expression was polite but unreadable. "Yes, Ryan?" she asked, folding her hands. "My mother is scheduled for brain surgery next Wednesday," I said, swallowing. "I'd like to request that day off to be with her." I paused, hoping to see a flicker of understanding, a hint of the woman who had once clasped my hand at our wedding and whispered, "We're partners in everything." Juliana leaned back. She folded one leg over the other and regarded me with the calm authority of a managing director. "We have the regional oncology account pitch that day," she said, her tone flat. "Request denied." I blinked, my chest tightening like a fist. I thought I'd misheard. "But 20 vacation days," I said, forcing the words out. "Perfect attendance. I've never missed a." "This is business, Ryan," she interrupted, her voice cool. "If you can't prioritize that, maybe this job and this marriage isn't for you." She turned away, signaling the end of our conversation. And in that moment, I realized everything I'd built for the last 4 years had been conditional on my availability to the company, not on my loyalty to my family. I stood there, stunned, as Juliana returned to her screen. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to nod. "Understood," I said quietly, and turned away, my heart pounding with the realization that I would have to choose. I stood outside Juliana's office, the morning light slanting in through the floor-to-ceiling windows and illuminating the scattered papers on her desk like fallen leaves on a forest floor. In the silence, I could hear my own pulse thudding in my ears. I took a steadying breath, pressed my palms against my thighs, and reminded myself that this conversation, my plea for one day off, was as reasonable as it was necessary. My mother's surgery was scheduled for next Wednesday at Grey Ridge Medical, and she had insisted that I be there. She was a neurosurgeon herself, but facing surgery on her own brain was different. The surgeon who would operate was her colleague, not her mother. I needed to stand beside her, the way she had always stood beside me. I knocked once, firmly, and pushed the door open. Juliana looked up from her laptop, her perfectly arched brows lifting in polite curiosity. Her world was a world of strategy decks, quarterly objectives, client KPIs. Mine had momentarily shifted into hospital corridors, waiting rooms, and the antiseptic smell of disinfectant. I tried to convey both worlds in my voice as I spoke. "Juliana, I need to request next Wednesday off," I said, forcing calm. "My mother's brain surgery is scheduled. I'd like to be with her." She didn't blink. There was a brief hesitation, a fraction of a second when her eyes flicked back to the spreadsheet on her screen, as if she would rather focus on percentages of growth than a son's fear for his mother. I watched her exhale and then set her hands on her keyboard. "We have the regional oncology account pitch that day," she said, the words sounding rehearsed. "Request denied." Denial. The word echoed in my mind. A flat refusal, a brick wall instead of empathy. I felt my heart stutter. I opened my mouth to remind her that I had 20 unused vacation days, that I'd never missed a deadline, that I had upheld perfect attendance for 4 years. Instead, I swallowed and tried again. "Juliana, I've never missed a deadline. I've never asked for a day off. I've given my all to this firm." I braced for a flicker of hesitation, a glimmer of understanding. But she merely folded one leg over the other and met my gaze evenly. "This is business, Ryan," she said. "If you can't prioritize the firm's commitments, even for a personal matter like this, then perhaps this job isn't the right fit." She tapped her phone twice, signaling that the conversation was over. I felt a sting in my chest as if her words had clipped my heart with a pair of dull scissors. I exhaled, a short, sharp sound. The boardroom felt too large, too empty, even though it was just her office with an attached conference table. My colleagues would walk by and ask questions. What was wrong? Did Juliana really refuse? I suppose the rumor mill would spin fast. Husband begs for mercy and mother's surgery. Wife denies both. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the choice I faced: loyalty to my firm or loyalty to my family. Swallowing my pride, I nodded. Understood, I said, my voice sounding distant, like someone else was speaking. I turned away and walked down the polished hallway, the rhythm of my footsteps echoing off the walls. I could feel the weight of every project I'd shepherded, every client call I'd answered at midnight, every strategy I'd devised while balancing family life, all pressing down on me. And then I felt something else surge up: anger, shock, disbelief. For years of meticulous, unwavering commitment, reduced to nothing more than an unobliging calendar entry. I exited into the lobby and paused between the rows of leather chairs. People sat with laptops open, phones pressed to ears, coffees in hand. They did not notice me. They did not know what had transpired. I wanted to shout. I wanted to rip the jet black badge from my lapel and throw it across the room. But instead, I sank onto one of the chairs and stared at the glossy tiled floor. This was the core of my life, this firm, yet it had turned its back when I needed it most. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. I know you'll be there. Love you. I typed back. I'm trying. But the truth was I felt trapped by the very work I had poured myself into. The Serenity Clinic pitch needed my final revisions, and that client insisted on digital mock-ups by noon. My peers were counting on me to lead the conference call with Westbrook Oncology. In my absence, they might stumble, damage our reputation, lose a contract. And if anyone asked why I was gone, the answer would be, because the boss's husband thought his mother's health came before revenue. How would they judge me then? I rose and walked back to my desk. The open plan workspace felt colder now, stripped of camaraderie. My team noticed me arriving, their faces registering concern, confusion, pity. A colleague, Marisol, whispered, "Is everything okay?" I forced a small smile. "Just a family thing," I said. "I'll sort it out." I didn't tell her what sorting it out meant, that I was considering violating policy and simply not coming in. Not taking leave officially, but abandoning the office to be at my mother's side no matter the consequences. By midday, I made my decision. I drafted an email to HR, copying Juliana out of necessity. I will be on family medical leave next Wednesday to assist my mother during brain surgery. I will ensure all deliverables are covered and client expectations are managed. I hovered over the send button for a moment, my finger trembling. I wondered whether this act of defiance, declaring an absence without her blessing, would shatter my marriage, my career, or perhaps both. Then I clicked send. Immediately, a cascade of emotions washed over me: relief, terror, exhilaration. I stood and stretched, my back cracking, as though I'd carried some invisible burden for years. I walked out of the office slower this time, savoring each step. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of spring blossoms. I breathed it in, tasting freedom and fear at once. I knew that by next week, I would stand beside my mother through every heartbeat of her surgery. I did not know what the outcome would be, but I knew that pledge, to family over firm, was worth every risk. That afternoon, as I locked my desk drawer and slipped my ID badge into my pocket, I felt something unstoppable awaken within me. I was no longer just the dutiful husband or the loyal strategist. I was a son who refused to let policy eclipse love. And I was ready to face whatever came next, consequences be damned, because some parts of life were beyond negotiation. I walked out of Wolf and Morrow Strategies without looking back, determined to prioritize the one thing that truly mattered. Monday morning arrived with a leaden weight that pressed against my chest from the moment I opened my eyes. The early sunlight slipped through the curtains, indifferent to the storm I was about to face. I dressed carefully, fastening my tie with measured precision, straightening my collar as if I could armor myself against what awaited me. Breakfast was a forgotten memory. I left the apartment on autopilot, coffee cooling in my hand as I walked the familiar route to Wolf and Morrow Strategies. The city around me stirred to life: pedestrians with briefcases, the hum of car engines, the distant rumble of a subway train. None of it prepared me for what would happen when I stepped through those glass doors. Inside the lobby, the air smelled of polished marble and recycled ambition. I barely registered the receptionist's nod as I passed, scanning my badge and heading toward my desk on the 20th floor. With every step, my heart beat faster, equal parts anticipation and dread. I thought I had made my position clear. I would take the day off to stand by my mother. I had sent the family medical leave notice. I had notified HR, copied Juliana out of protocol. I had believed our commitment to policy, to people, would cover what policy had denied me. But now, as I approached my cubicle, I sensed an eerie stillness in the air. There, at the edge of my workspace, two men in dark suits stood, security. Their presence felt incongruous in the morning rush, like sentinels guarding a vault I hadn't known contained anything worth guarding. Their expressions were unreadable, professional. My breath caught. I'd never seen security posted at my desk before. An uneasy chill swept along my spine. I slowed down, heart thundering, and stopped a few feet away. Something in their stance told me I was trespassing simply by showing up. Then I saw her, Juliana, framed by her office doorway, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line I'd never seen on her before. She looked at me not with warmth or disappointment, but with cold finality. For a moment, I wondered if I'd walked into the wrong office, if the real Juliana would burst forth, apologetic and explaining there'd been some misunderstanding. But no one moved. The room seemed to orbit around me, security officers flanking my path like judges awaiting a verdict. "Ryan," Juliana said, her voice low and steady, each word calibrated. "Clean out your desk. You're terminated." She did not smile. She did not soften the blow. She did not apologize. Those two security officers were there to ensure I obeyed orders without question. My mouth went dry. Terminated. The word reverberated through my skull like an explosion in a tunnel. I opened my mouth, but no sound emerged. I had imagined denial of a day off. I had braced for anger. I had not prepared for this. I don't understand. I managed to choke out. My voice sounded small, unfamiliar, a syllable swallowed by fear. "You can't do this." I followed policy. I put in the leave request. Juliana's expression revealed nothing but resolve. "Company policy does not cover insubordination, Ryan. You abandoned your responsibilities. You left without approval. You undermined your team. So I'm doing what I must." Security stepped forward, as though to shepherd me toward compliance. I felt the hot flush of humiliation creeping up my neck. My colleagues, clustered in nearby cubicles, exchanged glances. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to notice, but the tension was palpable. The rumor mill would be unstoppable. The husband who tried to take a day for his mother, only to be tossed out like trash. I forced myself to take a step back, then two. Each footfall felt heavier than the last. My suit jacket felt suffocating, like a straitjacket woven from corporate silk. I couldn't look at Juliana. I couldn't look at the security guards. I just wanted to disappear. "Please," I whispered, raising a hand. "Talk to me. At least tell me." "There's nothing more to say," Juliana cut in, her tone final. "Clean out your desk right now." She turned on her heel and marched back into her office, closing the door with a click that echoed through the hallway. Security moved in tandem as I approached my workspace. My hands trembled as I unlocked my drawer and opened it, revealing the carefully arranged stacks of notebooks, pens, and mementos from client events. I paused at the photo of the two of us on our wedding day, Juliana beaming beside me, our faces lit by the warm glow of celebration. That photo was now a relic, a reminder of how intertwined my professional and personal lives had been, the very duality that had brought me here. I lifted it gently, cradling it in my palm before placing it in a box already half filled with branded cardstock, empty coffee mugs, and the latest marketing collateral. I didn't have the energy to feel angry or betrayed. I felt only hollow, as though my identity had been scraped away with a dull blade. My coworkers whispered behind my back. I could hear the soft clack of high heels as someone passed, the tap of a keyboard returning to work as though nothing had happened. I wanted to shout, to explain, to demand justice, but my voice was gone. Instead, I emptied my desk, folding up jackets, gathering picture frames, unplugging my laptop. Each item I packed felt like a defeat, a relinquishment of the dreams I had built here. By the time I had a box in each arm, a security guard was at my side. "This way, sir," he said, gesturing toward the elevators. I nodded numbly. As we descended, The floors slipped past like pages in a calendar. 19, 18, 17, as if each one marked another step away from the life I had known. When the doors opened at the lobby, I stepped out into the fluorescent lights and hushed murmurs of the reception area. The receptionist looked up, startled, then a flicker of pity crossed her face as she saw the boxes in my arms. "Goodbye, Ryan," she said softly. I managed a small nod. I tried to muster a thank you, but it died in my throat. Instead, I walked past her and out the glass doors, into the brisk morning air that felt sharper than any blade. Outside, the city pulsed with activity, indifferent to my downfall. Taxis honked, joggers bounced along the sidewalk, and office workers on their smoke break exchanged laughs without a care for the man carrying 2 cardboard boxes. I paused on the sidewalk, setting the boxes down and inhaling deeply. The weight of the past 4 years pressed down on me, but buried beneath it was something else, a spark of defiance, a reminder that though Wolf and Morrow had sought to define me, they did not own me. My jaw set as I picked up the boxes again. My mother needed me. She didn't need a strategist. She needed her son. She needed someone who would never abandon her, regardless of corporate decree. My phone buzzed, a message lighting up the screen. "Ryan, I just saw the news." "I'm so sorry." It was from Marisol, my teammate. I didn't reply. There were no words that could explain what had happened or justify the choice I'd made. I simply tucked my phone away, slung the boxes under my arms, and began walking, heading away from the building that had been my world, toward the hospital where my mother lay in wait. Each step propelled me forward, away from betrayal and toward the one thing that mattered more than any job or title: family. And as I walked, I felt the first stirrings of something powerful, an understanding that endings, no matter how painful, often open the door to beginnings we never imagined possible. The moment I saw the first contract cancellation notice pop up on my phone, I knew my mother had begun her quiet campaign. It was an automated email from Grey Ridge Medical's purchasing department. Effective immediately, Wolf and Morrow strategies will no longer be retained for our upcoming public outreach campaigns. My thumb hovered over the alert. Then I scrolled through my inbox to find similar notices. Westbrook Oncology pulling their annual patient education campaign. Avitus Diagnostics rescinding their retainer. Sterling Health Solutions canceling an entire year's worth of work. The messages came from different addresses and different corporate footers, but they all carried the same unmistakable tone of diplomatic regret. Someone had flipped a switch, dismantling the account list one senior director at a time. And only one person had both motive and clout to pull it off: Dr. Miriam Carter. I sank into the sofa in our living room, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. The newspaper lay on the coffee table, its headline boasting stock market gains and celebrity weddings, irrelevant to the storm that raged within my veins. My phone buzzed again. Texts from former coworkers, short messages flavored with confusion and alarm. "Ryan, what's happening at Wolf and Morrow? I just got word they canceled us. Did you hear? Is this a glitch or an apocalypse?" Part of me wanted to reply, to explain that this was nothing short of corporate Armageddon orchestrated by my own mother, but I knew better than to put words in writing. Corporations lived on paper trails and email logs. My mother had already proven she could manipulate both without leaving fingerprints. Instead, I took a deep breath and texted back a single sentence: "I'll explain soon. Trust me." The response came almost instantly: "Okay, stay safe." Then I powered off my phone and stood, the centrifugal force of fear and adrenaline propelling me toward action. I gathered my jacket and headed to Grey Ridge Medical, my mother's territory, the epicenter of her empire. The hospital's facade rose before me like a cathedral of modern medicine, its glass walls reflecting a merciless sun. I navigated the familiar corridors, past reception desks and nurses' stations, feeling a strange sense of belonging and estrangement all at once. I'd spent countless hours here during my mother's residency, but this visit was different. This time, I wasn't a visitor. I was a messenger of change, a casualty of her reckoning. I found her in her office, behind a thick oak desk strewn with surgical journals and conference schedules. She looked up as I entered and offered a small, knowing smile. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a tidy bun, her eyes as keen and formidable as ever. I closed the door behind me and leaned against the desk, chest heaving. "You did it," I said, voice thick with awe and guilt. All those cancellations, were you behind them? She nodded, folding her fingers on the desk. I didn't raise a hand, Ryan. I made a few calls, shared ethical concerns about employee mistreatment, and after a few inquiries, the boards at each organization saw fit to terminate our contracts. She paused, her gaze unwavering. I did it because I needed Wolf and Morrow to see what happens when they disregard humanity. I swallowed hard, recalling the precision with which my mother approached every task. If she decided to influence the direction of healthcare campaigns, she treated it like a surgical procedure, meticulous, targeted, and irreversible. But why drag all those people into this? I asked, picturing my former teammates scrambling to cover their workloads, fearing layoffs. They didn't deserve to pay for this. Her expression softened momentarily. They'll recover. They'll rebuild. The firms that fire people for choosing family lose more than contracts. They lose their greatest asset, trust. You must remember, Ryan, that a company's true strength is its people. When you undermine that, you undermine the mission itself. She folded her hands more tightly. I wish I could have found a more direct way to reach Juliana, but she only listens when the bottom line's at risk. I sank into the chair opposite her, letting the truth wash over me. My mother's wrath was a calculated counterstrike to a system that valued profit over compassion. And the battlefield was corporate contracts. So where do we go from here? I asked, steeling myself for the enormity of rebuilding my career in Juliana's company. Mom leaned back, tapping a pen against her bottom lip. First, you need to decide what you want. You can return to corporate marketing with another firm, one that values your humanity, or you can help rebuild Wolf and Morrow from the ashes. That decision is yours. She studied me, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. But know this, I won't tolerate another injustice like this. If you choose to go back to that environment, you'll have my support. But if anything like this happens again, I will not hesitate. Silence stretched between us, punctuated only by distant paging announcements and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. My mother's ultimatum was clear: act with integrity or face the consequences. I swallowed. I need a moment, I said, rising and smoothing my suit jacket. I'll call you tonight. Back in the corridor, I paused by a row of windows overlooking the city skyline. The sun was dipping lower, painting the buildings in gold and amber. Contracts had vanished today, gone in a matter of hours, and with them, my former professional life. Yet beneath the wreckage lay opportunity, a chance to redefine success, to shape corporate culture from the ground up. As I stared out at the city, I felt the surge of possibilities. I could help craft a new kind of agency, one that balanced profitability with empathy. My phone buzzed again, this time the boardroom assistant from Wolf and Morrow, forwarding a terse email from Juliana's CFO. Urgent. Strategy meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please attend. It was proof that Wolf and Morrow was scrambling to contain the fallout, to salvage what remained of their reputation. And Juliana, for all her arrogance, was desperate. She didn't yet know how deep the water ran, how many contracts had evaporated, but she would find out soon enough. I pocketed the phone and walked to the hospital cafeteria, craving something solid to steady my nerves. The smell of grilled chicken and steamed vegetables felt oddly comforting. I ordered a sandwich and coffee, then found a small table near a window. As I ate, I watched families navigate the hospital corridors, mothers with children, husbands supporting wives, friends offering quiet encouragement. The scene was full of tenderness and urgency, a microcosm of life's fragility. It reminded me of why I'd chosen healthcare marketing in the first place, to tell stories that mattered, to connect patients and providers, to champion causes that saved lives. Finishing my meal, I returned to my phone and drafted an email to my two competing firms with whom I'd interviewed the week before. I thanked them for the opportunity and asked if my candidacy was still under consideration. Then I opened a new draft and composed a letter to Wolf and Morrow's board, outlining a vision for organizational reform, family leave policies, mental health support, emergency absence protections. I paused before hitting send, knowing that any misstep could burn bridges further. But I reminded myself that bridges sometimes need clearing before they can be rebuilt. As dusk settled, I left Grayridge Medical and made my way home. The city lights flickered on, and the skyline shimmered like a circuit board of possibility. I realized I was standing at a crossroads shaped by loyalty, love, and retribution. The contracts that vanished were not defeats but wake-up calls demanding change. And I, Ryan Carter, would help chart the course. Because in a world where corporations too often ignored the human heart, it was our responsibility to put it back at the center. That Thursday morning, I awakened to a string of vibration pulses on my nightstand. My phone screen glowed with notifications, half a dozen missed calls from former coworkers, a dozen text messages from clients, and an urgent email from Juliana's CFO. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, the gravity of what had unfolded became impossible to ignore. Wolf and Morrow Strategies was hemorrhaging contracts at an exponential rate, and I, once its loyal director of strategy, had become the unspoken architect of its collapse. I sat up on the edge of the bed, hard hammering, and read a text from Denise in accounting. Ryan, is it true? Grayridge just pulled everything. I typed a single word back. Yes. My thumb hovered over the send button before I tapped it. Then I dialed Denise. When she answered, her voice was tight with panic. What happened? The finance lead is in tears. She said our cash flow projections are in ruins. I swallowed. Tell her it's a temporary setback. We'll regain most of it. Denise's laugh sounded hollow. Temporary? Ryan, half our revenue is gone. I ended the call, my stomach twisting into knots. I got dressed in silence, pulling on a crisp shirt and polishing my shoes in a daze. I forced myself to eat 2 bites of toast, but the rest lay uneaten on my plate. My mind reeled with questions. How had my mother, an admired neurosurgeon, mobilized the Grayridge board so thoroughly? How quickly had word spread to Westbrook, Avitus, and Sterling? And most urgently, what did Juliana plan to do now that she had lost 60% of her firm's contracts? The email from the CFO waited in my inbox, subject line, urgent, board meeting at 9 a.m. I clicked it open, scrolling through charts showing the devastating revenue shortfall, bullet points detailing client departures, and a single-line request at the bottom. We need Ryan Carter's input on damage control. My eyes stung. Even now, they wanted me to clean up the mess I'd inadvertently caused. But beneath that resentment lay a deeper realization. They needed me more than I needed them. By the time I reached the Wolf and Morrow offices, the lobby was a whirlwind of hurried footsteps and panicked faces. The security guard at the desk recognized me instantly and let me through without scanning my badge. 19 floors up, I took the elevator in tense silence, rising past rows of empty cubicles and disused workstations. I passed the conference room door, its nameplate reading Regional Oncology Pitch, and swallowed. That pitch had been the catalyst for everything. Inside the boardroom, Juliana stood at the head of the table, her once impeccable posture now curved with exhaustion. The finance lead, Elliot, sat to her right, editing spreadsheets on his laptop and too afraid to look up. A half-empty coffee pot sat on a side table, its bitter aroma mingling with the sterile air conditioning. Around the long table sat department heads, their faces etched with disbelief or stony resolve. No one made eye contact with me as I entered. Instead, they watched Juliana, the founder they still revered despite her failures. She glanced at me and gestured to the empty chair beside Elliot. Ryan, we've asked you here because we need solutions. Her voice was hoarse. I swallowed and sat, setting my jacket neatly on the back of the chair. I cleared my throat. First, I said, let's get some context. How many clients in total have pulled their business? Elliot adjusted his glasses. We're looking at 8 canceled contracts, roughly 60% of our annual retainer revenue. Some were multi-year agreements, others one-off campaigns, but the loss is sizable enough to put us in the red this quarter. He exhaled and rubbed his temples. We're facing layoffs unless we can fill the gap quickly. His words landed like hammers. I leaned forward, steepling my fingers. Okay. Step 1. Triage. Identify which clients we can realistically win back and which we need to replace. I recommend forming 2 task forces, one to negotiate with former clients, offering improved terms and demonstrating our new employee-first policies, and another to pitch relief campaigns to nonprofit healthcare organizations that have robust budgets. I looked around the table. We pivot toward causes hospitals care about: maternal health, mental health, pediatric care, and emphasize our empathy-driven approach. Juliana listened, nodding slowly. And step 2. Step 2, I continued, is internal. We must show our remaining employees that we value them, to prevent a mass exodus. Announce immediate temporary bonuses, institute a transparent town hall meeting to address fears, and empower a core team to lead the client outreach. We need visible leadership, not silence. Her eyes met mine, bright despite the stress. You're right, she whispered. But why help us? Because I fired you. I drew in a breath. Because I believe this firm can be more than just a profit center. Because the work we do matters to hospitals and patients alike. Because people still rely on us to tell stories that change lives. And because, spite aside, I care about you and this company I helped build. My voice softened. Right now, you need someone who can rally these people. That's what I can do. Silence filled the room as everyone absorbed my words. Then Juliana exhaled and stood. She approached me, extended her hand. Help me clean up this mess. I took her hand, feeling a jolt of electricity as our fingers closed. Around us, the department heads exchanged looks of cautious hope. Over the next 4 hours, the boardroom transformed from a war council into a strategy hub. We divided into breakout sessions, client outreach, staffing, financial projections, and communications. I assigned leads, set deadlines, and promised weekly check-ins. We drafted apology letters to Grayridge and Westbrook, highlighting our new policies and inviting them to revisit partnerships. We brainstormed relief campaign ideas for free cancer screening events and telemedicine education. The energy shifted from panic to purpose. As the meeting adjourned late in the afternoon, I gathered my notes and stood. Juliana brushed a lock of hair from her face, hairline damp with perspiration. Ryan, thank you, she said, her voice tremulous. I don't know what would have happened without you. I smiled, though my gut still twisted at the memory of her cold dismissal. Just promise me one thing. Next time someone needs a day off for a family emergency, you'll say yes. Her eyes softened, and she nodded. I will. Walking back to the elevator, I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten. The contracts had vanished, but something more profound had emerged, a renewed clarity of purpose. I realized that leadership wasn't about invincibility or perfection. It was about showing up, owning mistakes, and rallying people around shared values. As the elevator doors closed, I envisioned the next steps, rolling out the new employee-first policies, rebuilding relationships with clients, and transforming Wolf and Morrow into the kind of agency that could withstand even a storm of cancellations. Outside, the sky was painted in streaks of orange and pink. I paused by the window, watching the city breathe and pulse below. The failure of one chapter was the catalyst for another. One that would define a new era for the firm, for my relationship with Juliana, and for how I define success itself. And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. When Juliana's call came mid-afternoon, I was hunched over my laptop at home, drafting emails to former clients and mapping out our next relief campaigns. I sensed urgency in her voice before she even spoke. Ryan, can you come into the office? Now. The tremor in her tone was unmistakable, a blend of desperation and resignation. I grabbed my coat and keys, bracing myself for whatever fallout remained. The drive downtown felt surreal. Street signs blurred past as memories of my abrupt termination lined the route. My desk emptied, security escorts, the hollow echo of glass doors closing behind me. I shook off the ghost riding shotgun and straightened my posture. If I had a purpose now, it was to seize this moment, to ride the momentum we'd built at yesterday's marathon board meeting. When I arrived, I found the lobby eerily quiet, the elevators working on express mode straight to the 20th floor. In the elevator, mirrors framed my determined expression. I reviewed my talking points one last time. Acknowledge the damage, outline the team's progress, present the next phase of client engagement. But as the doors opened, I realized this meeting wouldn't follow any script. The hallway outside Juliana's office was deserted, except for a single sheet of paper taped to her door. Please knock. Below, in faint handwriting, a scribbled time, 3:45 p.m., confirmed urgency. I knocked and entered. The boardroom had morphed into a scene of controlled chaos. Chairs were overturned, empty water glasses pooled on a side table, and financial reports lay scattered as though someone had rifled through them searching for answers. At the head of the table, Juliana stood alone, clutching a contract in trembling hands. Her usual composure was shattered. The veneer of unflappability cracked, revealing exhaustion etched into every line of her face. When she saw me, she balled the contract and tossed it onto the desk. We're done, Ryan, she said, voice raw. 60% of our contracts are gone. We have zero cash reserves to cover this quarter. The board is in meltdown. They want answers. She gestured. This is what they've offered. A cleanup role for you. Director of Strategy, full salary match, a 45% increase on top of that, a hefty signing bonus, in full creative control. Everything I wanted, they think you deserve, to lure you back so you can save us. My gut clenched. The board's proposal felt like the remnants of an apology that had been buried in spreadsheets and committee minutes. I could take it, return, rebuild, restore the status quo with a fat paycheck as a consolation prize. I stared at the contract's bold letters, the promise of authority gilded in corporate doublespeak. The irony was unmissable. They wanted to pay me to stay, after firing me for choosing family over firm. I inhaled slowly, my mind sorting through the implications. Juliana watched me with pleading eyes, as though the offer itself could mend the rupture between us. "Please," she said softly. "We need you." She ran a hand through her hair, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability. She was no longer the commanding director who denied my request. She was a leader drowning in consequences, desperate for a lifeline. I folded my arms, the contract burning a hole in my conscience. I thought of my mother, who had engineered this storm not for spite, but to enforce accountability. I thought of the employees who had stayed up through sleepless nights to cover canceled projects. I thought of the patients whose stories we were saving with our campaigns. I let the silence linger. The weight of every choice, past and present, pressed against my ribcage. I knew what I deserved. I knew what I could demand. I had learned that loyalty was earned through actions that honored humanity, not through empty titles or inflated paychecks. I looked Juliana in the eye and said, "You don't need me. You need someone to clean up your mess." The words fell like stones across the table. Her lips parted in shock. I continued, voice firmer now. "This contract is not about me being recognized or rewarded. It's about fixing what broke, not patching it with incentives." She shifted, defenseless. The board's gesture of generosity suddenly felt hollow, an attempt to buy loyalty rather than earn it. I walked around the table and picked up the crumpled paper. The smell of ink and effort lingered on the paper's edges. I smoothed it out, reading the fine print one last time, then drew a pen from my jacket pocket. Juliana's breath caught as I signed my name on the rejection line. I placed the pen down and folded the contract neatly, handing it back. I won't walk back into that world unless the terms serve people and not profit margins. Juliana pressed her palm to her forehead. "So what do you want?" she whispered. It was the question I'd waited to be asked. My heart pounded with conviction. "If I return," I said, "I don't want a title or a raise. I want to rewrite the rules. Family leave isn't a line item. It's a requirement. Emergency medical support isn't a perk. It's policy. Mental health days aren't optional. They're mandatory. And anyone who needs to take care of a loved one can do so without fear of losing their job." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "That's a lot to ask." I nodded. "It's the minimum we owe people who build this firm." I stepped back, letting the echo of my words settle over the boardroom. The empty chairs around us became symbols of potential, seats waiting to be filled by employees who would know their worth. Juliana swallowed, then rose and extended her hand. "Agreed," she said, voice thick with relief. "We'll draw up the policy changes immediately. I'll resign if the board resists." A rush of adrenaline surged through me as I shook her hand. In that moment, titles and raises paled beside the promise of genuine reform. We stood together in the aftermath, two partners bound by a shared vision of what true leadership could be. Outside the windows, the city carried on oblivious to our personal revolution. Inside, we charted a new path, one where contracts were not won through fear or leverage, but through respect and humanity. And as I left the boardroom that day, I realized the offer from the ashes was not a contract at all, but an invitation to remake everything. I sat across from my mother in her home office, the low hum of her desktop blending with the ticking of an antique wall clock. The sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating shelves lined with medical texts and awards. I closed my eyes, letting the magnitude of the moment sink in. Juliana and I had reached a fragile accord. I would return to the firm under strict new policies that protected employees, not exploit them. But before I could sign anything, I needed Mom's blessing and clarity on how to navigate the fallout. She folded her hands on the mahogany desk and regarded me with her trademark composure. "If you go back," she said, voice gentle but firm, "do it for the right reasons." Her gaze held mine. "Don't return out of spite or revenge. Do it to build something better." I nodded, absorbing her words. In that instant, I understood that this was my opportunity not only to reshape a company, but to honor the sacrifices she and I had made for family and integrity. I leaned forward, catching a whiff of her familiar scent, an undercurrent of antiseptic and lavender. "I want to do more than patch policies," I said. I want to cultivate a culture where nobody fears asking for help. I pictured myself standing before our employees, explaining the new family leave clauses, the mental health days journaling program, the emergency medical support fund. I imagined their relief, their gratitude, even their skepticism. Change would be messy, and real transformation required more than words on paper. Mom's eyes softened. Then set measurable goals, she advised. Track usage of these benefits. Survey employees' satisfaction every quarter. Report failures as transparently as successes. Her advice was surgical in its precision, a blueprint for accountability. I realized that without metrics, policies might remain empty promises. I resolved to present the board not only with proposed clauses, but with a comprehensive implementation plan, timelines, budget allocations, communication strategies, and follow-up audits. I stood and recited my commitments out loud. I will ensure every employee knows they can take care of a loved one without losing their position. I will allocate funds for paid medical leave, create a mental health stipend, and establish an anonymous hotline for family emergency requests. I will publish quarterly reports on policy usage and satisfaction. And I will step down if these standards falter. Mom's lips curved into a proud smile as she reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. That's how you do it, she said. You're not just drafting policies. You're holding yourself accountable. Armed with her support, I drafted the formal proposal that evening. I cross-checked legal requirements and consulted HR best practices. By nightfall, a polished document lay waiting for Juliana's signature, a robust suite of employee-centered policies, bound by timelines and reporting structures. I emailed it to her with a concise message. This is our roadmap. Let's build it together. I added her personal pledge in the CC line, knowing her commitment would carry weight with the board. The next morning, I walked into the office not as a returning employee, but as a catalyst for change. Colleagues whispered as I passed, some offering cautious smiles, others doubtful. In my heart, I carried Mom's words and her unwavering belief in doing the right thing. And as I stood at the threshold of the conference room, proposal in hand, I felt something shift in the air. A collective breath held in anticipation of a new chapter where compassion would guide our strategy and humanity would define our success. I spent the weekend mapping out my outreach plan, drafting apology emails, and assembling a list of the clients we had lost. Monday morning, I walked into the office carrying a coffee for myself and another for Denise, who met me with cautious optimism. Ready to dive in? I asked. She nodded, her expression a mix of relief and fatigue. Together, we huddled over her laptop, refining the draft of our apology letter, sincere, concise, and accompanied by an outline of the policy reforms. I added personal anecdotes about the challenges families face, tying them to our new family-first ethos. When the letter was final, I hit send simultaneously to Grayridge, Westbrook, Avitus, and the others. Within an hour, I received a reply from Grayridge's communications director. We appreciate your transparency and would like to discuss reinstating our contract under your new policies. My heart leapt. A few minutes later, Westbrook followed suit, and then Avitus. By mid-morning, 3 of the largest former clients had expressed willingness to return. The tension in the office shifted palpably. Whispered conversations turned to cautious smiles. Juliana stopped by my desk, her eyes bright. You did it, she said, as if astonished that reconciliation was even possible. We rebuild from here. I nodded, reminding myself that momentum hinged on consistent follow-through. That afternoon, I led a town hall meeting in the conference room. Employees filled every available chair, some standing at the back, others perched on table edges. I opened with the story of my mother's surgery and the board's decision to prioritize humanity over profits. I walked them through the policy changes. Unlimited family leave, mandatory mental health days, an emergency care stipend, and quarterly transparency reports. I invited questions, and a flood of hands shot up. The finance team asked about budget allocations, the creative department asked how swift approvals would work, HR asked about training managers to handle sensitive requests. Answering each question, I realized how starved the team had been for genuine dialogue. The room crackled with energy as they grasped the implications of policies they had longed for but never believed would materialize. Over the next 2 weeks, I met individually with our top 5 returning clients to reaffirm commitments and refine campaign scopes. Each meeting felt like planting seeds, gratitude rooted in trust, ready to sprout renewed collaboration. Meanwhile, I worked with HR to roll out training sessions, helped legal finalize the policy language, and coordinated with IT to set up an anonymous hotline. I checked in with Denise daily, celebrating small wins, a client signing a 1-year extension, a manager scheduling mental health workshops, the first employee requesting bereavement leave without fear. By the end of the month, we had regained 75% of our former contracts and onboarded a local nonprofit for a pro bono campaign. Internally, morale soared. Team lunches re-emerged. The open office floor buzzed with laughter and brainstorming sessions. As I walked past the marketing bullpen one evening, I overheard someone say, "I'm proud to work here again." I paused, letting the words sink in. Rebuilding our reputation was not just about winning back clients. It was about restoring faith among the people who made this firm and our mission possible. And in that moment, I knew we had done more than salvage a company. We had changed its very soul. The morning the article appeared felt surreal. I was reviewing client deliverables when Denise pinged me. The Atlantic Ledger just featured us. I clicked the link and watched the headline pulse on the screen. The man who rewrote corporate loyalty, from terminated to transformed. Below, a portrait of me in the boardroom, sleeves rolled up, eyes determined. My heart skipped as I read the opening lines. How a son's choice to stand by his mother sparked a revolution in corporate policy, inspiring an employee-first movement across the industry. I scrolled down to find my quote in bold. If a company punishes you for being human, it doesn't deserve your brilliance. The words felt both foreign and wholly mine. Comments flooded in. Congratulations, envy, offers to speak at conferences, inquiries from other firms seeking to replicate our model. My inbox overflowed, and just like that, our story had gone viral. Juliana knocked on my office door, her face softer than I'd seen it in years. "You've changed more than Wolf and Morrow," she said quietly, stepping inside. "You've changed the conversation in every boardroom in the state." I shrugged, unsettled by the attention. "We just did what we should have done all along." She smiled, eyes misty. "You made the right call." By noon, applications from prospective employees poured in. People wrote of toxic workplaces where family emergencies meant pink slips, of burnout so crushing they'd left industries altogether. Now they saw us not as a job, but as a beacon. I forwarded the best resumes to HR with the note, "Talent of this caliber belongs here." I felt a swell of pride knowing we could offer opportunities to those whose brilliance had been stifled elsewhere. That afternoon, I joined a video call with leaders from 3 other agencies. They wanted guidance on drafting their own family-first policies. I shared our implementation timeline, our quarterly reporting structure, and anecdotes about employees who'd taken emergency leave without fear of losing health coverage. Hearing them ask practical questions, how did we fund the leave stipend? How did we train managers, affirmed that our journey had ripple effects far beyond our own walls. Later, as evening light filtered through the conference room windows, I looked around at the faces of my team, creative directors, account managers, junior analysts, each absorbed in meaningful work. No one whispered about layoffs or pending mergers. Instead, their laughter echoed off the glass walls as they collaborated on a nonprofit telehealth campaign. I realized then that the story wasn't just ours to tell, it was theirs to live. When I walked home that night, the city lights flickered with possibility. My phone buzzed with another notification, this time an invitation to speak at a national healthcare marketing summit. I paused on the sidewalk, picturing a stage where I could share our principles with thousands. I tapped accept, the click resonating like a promise. Back in my apartment, I found a message from Mom. "Proud doesn't begin to cover it." I smiled and texted her back. "Couldn't have done it without you." As I set my phone aside, I reflected on how far we'd come from one denied day off to reshaping an entire industry. The article had changed our future, spreading our story of compassion and conviction. And though the journey had been born of crisis, it had led us to something greater, a legacy where humanity thrived at the heart of business. 2 years have passed since that fateful day I asked for one single day off, and everything has changed. Wolf and Morrow Strategies has been reborn as Greyline Collective, a rebranded, employee-first agency where compassion and creativity share equal billing. Walking into our offices now feels like stepping into a living testament to the values we fought to instill. Sunlight filters through the open floor plan windows, illuminating collaborative workstations where employees hover over sketches and data dashboards in eager conversation. Hallway message boards celebrate new parents, highlight mental health resources, and proudly display quarterly transparency reports next to client case studies. I paused by a poster illustrating our retention metrics. Over 95% employee retention over the past year, and a warm swell of pride wells up in my chest. When I arrive at my desk each morning, it's never with dread. Instead, I greet Denise, now Director of Client Relations, with a genuine smile, and we trade updates on client wins and family leave requests alike. Last week, a team member returned from maternity leave, and we threw her a welcome-back lunch that filled the cafeteria with laughter and confetti. Tomorrow, we'll host guest speakers on burnout prevention and financial planning. Every initiative ties back to the promise I made my mother, that no one here would ever choose between work and family again. The industry has taken notice. Greyline Collective's flagship campaigns for Grey Ridge Medical's Mental Health Awareness Series and Westbrook Oncology's Patient Navigation Program have won national awards. Our case studies are taught at business schools. Other agencies look to us for guidance on enacting compassionate policies without sacrificing growth. Yet despite the accolades, I remain grounded in the simple truth that sparked this transformation. Empathy drives innovation. My relationship with Juliana is civil but distant. She resigned quietly when the board insisted on the policies I proposed. She now operates a boutique consultancy that, ironically, advises other firms on leadership ethics. We send the occasional courtesy email, birthday greetings, or industry conference invitations, but our personal chapter closed the moment our priorities diverged. I bear no malice. I simply recognize that some doors, once closed, yield the greatest opportunities when left unopened. At home, my mother has recovered fully from her surgery and now spearheads statewide initiatives advocating for hospital staff rights. She mentors young neurosurgeons and publishes research on surgical burnout. Last weekend, she flew in early from a medical summit to surprise me at our company anniversary celebration. I watched from the stage as she shared the podium with me, recounting how loyalty to family had reshaped corporate culture. When she spoke of compassion as the core of leadership, the room erupted in applause that shook the walls. In her eyes, I saw pride and affection, the same steady encouragement that guided me through every decision. That evening, as the celebration wound down, I felt the weight of gratitude more keenly than ever. I had witnessed fervent boardroom debates, frantic negotiations, and near collapse. I had experienced the sting of rejection and the thrill of renewal. And through it all, I learned that thriving companies are built on a foundation of respect, transparency, and genuine care for the people who give their creativity and talent each day. Standing alone on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, I breathed in the cool night air and reflected on the twist of fate that began with a denied day off. What had seemed like a small request ignited a movement that transcended contracts and profit margins. It redefined loyalty and illustrated that true leadership is not measured by quarterly earnings alone, but by the extent to which organizations honor the humanity of every individual. I raised my glass to the lights below, to my mother's unwavering resolve, and to the future we had forged together. In that toast lay the final proof. Sometimes the best revenge is not retaliation, but the triumph of building something far more enduring than any contract. An enduring legacy of compassion where people always come first.